there, Banditos. Welcome to the latest and last Wednesday episode of the Dollar Bin Bandits for 2023, where, as always, we bring you interviews of your favorite comic book creators of yesterday and today. And how do we do that? We fling open the doors of your local comic book shop. We just bust right in. We're like, hey, let's talk to some people. Well, today is no different, okay? We're bringing you an interview with someone who I've always wanted to talk to. He's had some great runs on some of my favorite comic books. We're talking about Paul Pelletier. Just an amazing artist. He's worked everywhere, to be honest with you. He's worked at DC, Marvel, CrossGen, Malibu. Okay, and he's had some very long runs on some really great comics. He's worked on Batgirl, Batman and Robin Eternal, The Flash, long run on The Flash, very long run on Green Lantern, which I adore. He's worked on some great stuff for Marvel as well. Exiles, Fall of the Hulks, Fear Itself, which is a great series. And to be quite honest with you, we get into some really interesting stuff. We even mention a little series called Superboy and the Ravers, because, that was awesome. But look, without further ado, let's get to the goodness. This is Paul Pelletier. You're not seeing things. Orrin and Mike are not here. It's just me. But I am so pleased to be joined by none other than Paul Pelletier. How are you, sir?
I'm doing okay, hanging in there.
Great. I'm glad to hear it. I'm going to kick it off the same way we do with everyone, and that is to ask you how you first discovered comics.
Ever since I was a little kid, I always enjoyed like Charles Schultz's work, the Peanut stuff. But it wasn't until about fifth grade that one of my best friends introduced me to Marvel Comics, and that was pretty much what started my love for getting into comics, reading, and then drawing them.
And the follow-up is, do you have still any of those comics that you first collected?
I do. I remember my mom getting me a package of, it was like a 3-pack of comics, and I think it was a Bugs Bunny comic in there. Might have been another Warner Brothers, and then there was a Marvel Comics old Hulk issue that I actually still have to this day. So that, and I think the first comic book, like my best friend at the time introduced me to the Claremont Byrne X-Men.
Okay.
And I think the first time I bought one of those issues was at a garage sale for like 50 cents, and I still have that copy.
That's interesting. A lot of people, we talk to them, and collectors like ourselves, it's very common for them to collect. For some reason, you part ways with them, and then later on down the road, you're like, oh, you're clamoring to get your hands on them yet again.
Right.
I went through that twice. Lost my G.I. Joe set, and then got rid of them, and then got them again, and lost them again. Anyway. So how did you make your way from, as a fan, and then turn that into your profession?
Well, in school, a bunch of us really enjoyed trying to do our own comics, and I think I was the only one stubborn enough to keep going with it. Right after high school, I applied to the Joe Kubert School. Actually went down, interviewed with Joe himself, and I got accepted, but I couldn't afford the tuition. So I kind of did it the hard way. I grew up, and I still live in Maine. And I ended up hooking up with small publishers up here in Maine. The first one was with Zen the Intergalactic Ninja, and then I hooked up with a couple outfits. It was Hammock Publications, and then it became Alpha Productions. And I essentially took about 4 years doing comics, black and white comics, essentially for free, or very, very little money. And through Alpha Productions, we started doing conventions, and I met people that worked for slightly bigger companies. Like I met Roland Mann and Steve Butler and Mitch Bird. They were doing Silverline Productions. And I believe Mitch was working on Cat and Mouse at that time. And Roland was interested in doing a Demon's Tales miniseries. And so when we met at a convention, he really, liked what I was doing. So I ended up doing Demon's Tales with him for Adventure Comics, and that work for Adventure, they were uh, one of the side companies for Malibu, and Malibu was just starting to kick off some of their really big projects, and that's how I ended up doing X Mutants. And then from there, that was the first job. That was probably just about 4 years after high school. I was able to quit my day job. I was working in a shoe factory cutting shoe leather, and that was the first time I could quit my job and start doing comics full time. So I was basically just working with small independent companies here in Maine and kind of working my way up.
I'd love to pick your brain about the shoemaking though too.
I was just cutting shoe leather, so it wasn't anything too complex.
I find that stuff fascinating though. I do woodworking on the side myself, so I find all that type of stuff interesting. And anyway,
I worked in a rug factory. I washed dishes. I mean, basically just whatever could pay the bills, and then I could draw comics on the side.
fair enough.
Mhm.
So what were some of, I'm going to come back to Zen because I was talking to Oren about that earlier today, but early on in your artistic career, what were some of your, obviously, your artistic inspirations really?
Well, without a doubt, John Byrne was probably the biggest inspiration. Yeah, that run he had with Chris Claremont and Terry Austin on the X-Men was pretty much the foundation for me. But then later on, I picked up on Alan Davis, who probably to this day is still probably my favorite comic book artist. And I was also a huge fan of Dale Keown, even before the Hulk stuff, when he was doing Dragon Force and Dragon Ring for, I think it was Aircel Comics. Yeah, so those were the big three, but I mean, I've always loved guys like Dave Cockrum and Joe Staten, the Bernie Wrightsons, just so many different artists that kind of help mold, what I do. And I say my style, but my style, it's kind of traditional American superhero comics. And yeah, so I mean, I still look at the stuff I do now, and I can see storytelling elements that I would see in some of those Byrne X-Men books, and so yeah, you can definitely, I think you can see the influences in my style, without it being like a ripoff or anything. I think I've got my own thing going, but yeah, there's several people that I said Byrne, Alan Davis, and Dale Keown were probably the big three for me.
That's great. No, I think that's, I think that's pretty interesting as certainly not an artist, but my wife is. And, it's just kind of natural. You pick up, you kind of, I don't know, you learn by observation and, looking at other people's work and, subconsciously, I guess maybe you kind of pick stuff up and
Well, I had always
it
heard
shows through.
from some people saying like that the worst way to learn how to draw comics is by looking at comics. And it's like, well, wait a second. It's like, what am I supposed to do? So, but
Yeah.
you try to learn from the people who have done it before. And since there aren't as many, like apprenticeship programs for comics,
Right.
you look at comic books.
Now, do you do things digitally nowadays versus?
I don't.
Okay.
No, no. Obviously, I could barely get my computer to work for for the Zoom meeting. So, no, everything's just pencil on paper, pretty much. Yeah.
No, fair enough. I
I,
tried
I
those
always,
tablets and I can't.
I,
It just drives me
I
crazy.
always joke, pencil and paper was good enough for Kirby. It's good enough for me. So,
Absolutely,
yeah.
I agree with you 100%.
Mhm.
Now, I wanted to jump to Zen. Like I said, Oren and I were discussing it today, and it seemed like it was a real hot commodity back in the day. And what was it like back, behind the scenes creating that
Well, I didn't actually create it.
or
I
working on
came
it? I
on
should say.
with issue. Trying to remember which issue it was, 4. I think 4 or 5, and basically I just did layouts. That was my first job, because Dan Cody, the artist, he was doing everything with airbrush. But I was just excited. Hey, it was a chance to get my name in a comic book, and The guys, both Steve Stern and Dave and Dan Cody, lived in the city next to me. They lived in Auburn, Maine, and I grew up in Lewiston. And it was just exciting to get a chance to do any kind of work in a comic book. So I can't take any credit for creating anything. That was all Dan and Steve.
Fair enough. And what was your experience like working at CrossGen? Now we've talked to a few people over the years who have, worked there in one capacity or another, and it's kind of like a mixed bag of reviews.
Mm-hmm.
Good studio, great collaboration,
Yep.
somewhat of a toxic environment at times, but what was your experience like?
Um, yeah, I always say it ended horribly, but I don't regret the experience because I look at what my art was like in the '90s up to CrossGen, and then I look at what I was producing after CrossGen and on, and I think I really grew leaps and bounds over that time because up to that point I had always worked alone and just by myself, and being thrown into a studio with the likes of the Butch Geis and Bart Sears and Steve Epting and Jim Chung and Mike Perkins and Scott Eaton. I mean, I couldn't help but get better. Just that healthy sense of competition by looking at what everybody else was producing during the day, and I would just you go around walking around the quads and looking what everybody else is doing. It's like, man, I got to raise my game to keep up with these other guys. So in that aspect, I don't regret it one bit. Um, yeah, I always joke with Ron Mars. It's like, somebody's got to write a book about the CrossGen experience. I mean, granted, it's 20 plus years later, but at least the people in the industry that didn't go to CrossGen, I think, would probably get a kick out of reading the stories about some of the stuff that went on there and just the experience. So,
Let Ron
yeah.
wryte it, and then
And other
and then you
people,
can illustrate it.
I I don't know if I'm the right guy for that, but
I'm gonna bring it up. We're interviewing him in another couple of weeks. I'm gonna bring it up to
who you got, Ron? You're gonna,
yes.
yeah, yeah. I always thought it would be funny, Ron and the other writers like Tony Bedard and Mark Wade and Chuck Dixon. The writers should get together and start getting all these stories together. But yeah, it's there have been other professionals that always joke that whenever they talk to CrossGen guys, it's like we get this 1,000-yard stare, like we're all in Nam or something. It was goofy, but I mean it had its moments. But like I said, as a learning experience for me, it was pretty important because I think right before I got asked if I wanted to join CrossGen, I wasn't really in a good place in my career. I wasn't enjoying what I was doing. I didn't even want to see my books on the stands at that point. It's like I needed a shakeup, and it came at a perfect time.
Very interesting. That's
Mhm.
an interesting way of putting it. No one has ever put it like Nam, but it paints a vivid picture.
Yeah, yep,
You know.
yep.
So at what point do you make your way to DC and then Marvel?
Well, DC was that was right after I had worked on X Mutants for Malibu, and growing up, I was always a Marvel kid. I never read DC books. I wasn't really familiar with them at all. Never intended on sending my like a portfolio or samples to DC. But when I was working on X Mutants, Ken Branch was the inker working on me on the early, probably first 4 or 5 issues, I think. And he had sent samples of his inks over my pencils to DC for submissions. And he got work with DC, but at the same time, the editor he was working with asked, well, who's this penciler you're working with? So I got a call out of the blue from DC to do some work with them. I think the first thing I did was an issue of Dark Stars. And then I ended up doing a 21 issue run on The Outsiders with Mike Barr. So it just kind of happened that yeah, I'd never sent samples to DC. It was thank I can thank Ken Branch for sending samples to DC with his inks on my pencils. So that's how I ended up with DC, and I worked with them. Was it 94 to about 2001? I had done some spot Marvel work at that time, in the 90s, but nothing regular. Like an issue here, I think I did some backup stories in the Hulk back when I'm trying to remember. It was after the Keown stuff. That was Gary Frank was drawing the book.
Hmm.
I was doing backups with the Pantheon characters.
Okay.
And I think I did one fill-in issue. I'm trying to remember because I think initially when I was working with Alpha Productions here in Maine, Ron Fortier, one of the writer we were working with, did a short story for the Hulk, just as a submission. I penciled it. Good friend of mine, Bob Cram, did the ink work, and I'm trying to remember. I think what happened was either he submitted it to Marvel, or I got another backup story in a Hulk annual, and because of that, he ended up sending that story. So I think that's kind of how I got my in with Marvel. It's still a little spotty, but that was initially, like I said, it was just an issue here, some pages that in some odd book here and there. It wasn't until after CrossGen when things fell apart. I remember when I think it was Joe Quesada and Mike Martz came down to Florida after CrossGen was imploding, and they were really cool. And they said they wanted to help as many of us as possible to land on our feet after CrossGen went under. And so I ended up, I was doing some She-Hulk stuff with Dan Slott, and I ended up doing probably about 8 years, 7 or 8 years of Marvel after that. So the ironic thing is, when I said earlier that I wasn't really in a good place in my career right before CrossGen, um, I was with DC, and like I said, I think it was Titans. I really wasn't all that happy with what I was doing. So I was actually talking with Dan Slott at that time, and we were thinking about pitching a She-Hulk book to Marvel. And then I ended up going to CrossGen, and then ironically, the first book I ended up working on at Marvel with Dan, was She-Hulk with Dan Slott right after CrossGen. So it was kind of funny how that worked out.
That's great.
Yep.
Now you worked on, I mean, just fantastic. All the like heavy hitters at DC: Batman, Aquaman, Green Lantern. You worked on. You had a very long run on Green Lantern, and I mean, I'm a huge Green Lantern fan,
Hmm.
and you were there during the Kyle Rayner years,
Yep.
I believe, and working with Ron Mars.
Yep.
What kept you on that book? And what was it like for you working on like a legacy character like Green Lantern, which is at that point, the newer version of it?
Right. Well, like I said, I wasn't really a DC kid,
Right.
so all these characters were pretty new to me. Well, especially Kyle at that time, because I think Ron and Daryl Banks had just pretty much started that book,
Right.
and I was brought in because we're helping out with deadlines and whatnot. So it was. I guess Kyle technically was new to everybody, but especially to me. And I don't know. It was funny because a lot of times my career is basically, well, what's available to draw, and they'll say, well, here's this book. It's like, all right, I'll take it on. So I think Outsiders was being canceled pretty soon, and um, I think I think it was Kevin Dooley who approached me about possibly jumping on Green Lantern to help out, help Daryl out with deadlines. So, yep. So it's like, well, jump off one sinking ship and jump on the Green Lantern for a while.
Mr. Green
So,
Lantern himself, Kevin Dooley.
yep.
Absolutely love talking to him. Because
Hmm.
you just said, we teed up our conversation. How'd you get into comics? How'd you get into DC? He goes, I wanted to do Green Lantern. I walked in and I got Green Lantern. I was like, all right, interview him. We're good.
Yep.
Um,
Funny, Kevin at one point, I think I was probably what 25 when I was working on some of the Green Lantern stuff. And Kevin used to call me the grumpiest young man in comics. So we got along pretty well, though. I loved working with Kevin.
Now you mentioned Dark Stars, which I always thought they were just really cool. Kind of a offshoot of the Green Lanterns,
Right.
in their periphery in that world, and they've kind of made their way back into the lore over the years, and they go away and come back. Why don't you think, you know, I mean, I love them and they serve a really cool purpose. And they've certainly built on their lore over the years. But why
Mhm.
do you think maybe that didn't take off or really last for as long as it should have, I think?
It's so hard to tell sometimes what sticks and what doesn't. I mean, it's. I mean, for the longest time, I I don't understand the Deadpool thing, but I mean, obviously, a lot of people disagree with that. So, but yeah, it's really difficult. I don't know if it's because they were similar enough to Green Lantern Corps that people just wanted to read Green Lantern and Green Lantern Corps instead. It's really difficult to tell. You never know. And then, of course, it's one of those things where it might not have stuck initially, but years down the road, they reboot it or bring it back, then it becomes a big thing again. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
I
so it's
mean,
really,
they brought so many, or included so many colors of lantern cores, and then you find out
hmm
that the Dark Stars are an offshoot of the Green Lanterns ancestrally, or some variation or whatever.
right.
But yeah, they were ahead of their time. They were fun. So it was
Those costumes weren't fun to draw, though. Oh my God.
you
I
mean
do
like the
remember.
hundreds of lines on the front and
Yeah,
stuff?
yep, yep. No, not fun at all. No.
Fair enough. I could see how solid colors really make it much easier.
hmm There's
Green. Oh,
something,
good. Go. All right.
there's something for that traditional, like a Spider-Man or green, the Hal Jordan Green Lantern costume, or even like the Legion costumes. Simple, nice design, easy to draw at different angles. So, yep.
I can respect that. Now, something I noticed is that in your career, you worked on a lot of secret files, or a few, big like secret files issues. How did you get working on those? Which I always thought were awesome. Like newer versions of like the Who's Who.
Right. Again, it's one of those things where an editor needed, some work done. I've always had a good reputation of being reliable and getting stuff done on deadline. So when work becomes available and they give me a call, and if I can squeeze it in, I'll take it. So I think it's never been anything I've actually pursued, but if the job ended up in my lap, hey, well, I'll take it. So,
Understood.
mhm.
You worked at DC. You left, and then I believe you came back during New 52.
Yep.
What was that experience like for you? I know you're not, you weren't necessarily a DC guy, but at that point, I'm sure you got the lay of the land, you're understanding the business and the goings on within DC. And as a fan, there was a lot of concern for New 52. Like,
Right.
I remember at the time, there were a lot of stories and characters that I thought were really gaining momentum and they were taking off, and I was anxious to see where they were going. And then all of a sudden, everything gets flipped and this is a whole new slate.
Right.
Um, I was, concerned. Of course, one it wouldn't be for another 5 or 6 years later that things start squeaking their way back in. But, as someone who was working on characters, Aquaman, nonetheless, who I will say, I think benefited from New 52.
Yep.
Um, what was it like for you working at DC during that time?
Well, I mean, I was disappointed leaving Marvel because I really enjoyed my time with them. Um, but at that point, they said they weren't doing exclusive contracts anymore, and Disney had just bought them out, and I'm sure you probably heard from other people when Disney bought Marvel, they cut a lot of people's page rates. So that's why I started sniffing around at DC again. And it was actually Jeff Johns who reached out to me about possibly coming on Aquaman because Ivan Rice was leaving the book. And I mean, replacing someone like Ivan's like, oh my God, because Ivan's probably one of the best artists out there. But I was not really that familiar with Aquaman at all. And Jeff said, well, why don't you go and get the trade of the first 6 issues of the New 52 stuff, and we'll talk in a couple days. So I ended up I got the trade, I read through it, and it's like, yep, they're doing some really cool things with this character. It's I mean, this could be a lot of fun to be a part of. So yeah, when we talk later, I said, yep, I'll do it. So, sounds good to me. But little did I know that I think my first issue was 15, I think, of the New 52 Aquaman. And when I had started the book, I didn't know it was already in previews under a different artist. So I was kind of like bringing last minute additions to the book. But I ended up doing what I think 25 issues, I think, of the book. So, and I
Yeah.
really enjoyed both the Jeff Johns run and the Jeff Parker stuff. It was all a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sorry to anyone who's hearing this, but they've heard me say it too many times. But I'm just a big fan of Jeff Johns and his work, his
Mhm.
writing. I mean, he just, you know, he just does his homework and, will make references to old, you know, characters and will kind of make everything be included and count. And I think that's, you know,
Well, that and he knows how to write a comic book.
yeah,
He'll set things up for visual impact. He won't just have like throwaway spread, full page spread or something. He leads up to it for those oh crap moments
yeah,
that a lot of it, a lot of the newer writers I've worked with haven't quite gotten to that point. So working with someone like Jeff was, yeah, and Ron Mars is the same way. I mean, they know how to write for comic books. I think the only drawback to the my time with Jeff Johns on Aquaman was I think he was one of the higher ups at DC, and he was involved with a lot of the fledgling movie stuff, and he was involved with TV stuff. So he was spread really thin. So sometimes it was difficult trying to get the scripts out of him,
right.
but every time I get them, it's like, yeah, this is really cool stuff. It was a blast to draw.
Yeah, that was really cool. I mean, you know, Aquaman has been one of these characters over the years. I think a lot of people, they will make fun of,
Yep.
but they're secretly reading because if you get into it, like it's a pretty cool character. And certainly like many other characters over the years, it ebbs and flows and
Yep.
like they get really cool, then you're like, yeah, not so much. But New 52 really turned that around and expanded on the history and the lore of the character and
One of the things I really enjoyed about it too was just the relationship between Arthur and Mira. It just seemed like a really solid couple where there's no drama or anything. It just worked really nicely. And I hadn't really seen much of that in a lot of typical comics. There's
right.
always usually some kind of drama or whatever, but Mira and Aquaman it just worked really nicely.
And what I appreciate about your artwork for it is, there was a cleanness and sharpness to it, which I just adore.
Well,
It just,
like I said, I had to follow Ivan. So again, it's one of those times where it's like, man, I got to up my game because, man, I don't want people to be too disappointed that Ivan's leaving. So, but I think one of the advantages I had was Rod Rice, who was coloring the book, stayed on when I took over on the artwork. So with his super strong colors, I think there was some continuity between what Ivan was doing and what I was doing. So there wasn't really much of a drop off, which, you know, I really appreciated. So it really helped me out.
You made a point about Ivan and, taking over after he left. Is there a certain amount of concern from artists where they feel like they need to kind of emulate that style going into a book because of, I don't know, maybe just fear of backlash or, fans having issues or not liking or something like that? Or is that just more your own personal concern that kind of makes it against
Yeah,
your work?
it's for me. It's just trying to keep the quality of the artwork. Trying to think if there are other. I mean, even working, on the Green Lantern stuff. Daryl had pretty much, set the tone and the look for Kyle Rayner and that Green Lantern stuff. And I don't draw very much like Daryl, but I would just try to do the best I could because I didn't want the yeah, my art's not going to look like his, but I don't want the quality to dip. So as long as it maintains quality, that's what I always look to do. But yeah, yeah, I think Ivan's probably the guy that I've jumped on the book that kind of intimidated me the most, following because yeah, I have the utmost respect for what he does.
Now, your work was fantastic. I mean, before we have these interviews, I try to go back and look through my comics and just make sure I
Yep.
can, look, there's a lot of art and a lot of comics over the years. I don't remember every
Hmm.
single one of them. You try to refamiliarize yourself with the issues. I'm like, oh man, yeah, that's why I love doing this because the artwork is just awesome. And when characters like, obviously Superman and Green Lantern for me are my go-tos, but the work you've done on Titans and Flash, and I mean, obviously there's Marvel as well. I am a big DC fan, but She-Hulk.
No Superboy and the Ravers.
All right, look, if we want to turn this into me getting pissed off about Superboy and the Ravers, I have every single issue of Superboy and the Ravers, and it came up in conversation with someone, a friend of mine who is another Superman fan. We're like, why? I don't know why, but I have every one of them. I thought that was going to be something cool.
I remember Ron Mars still gives me crap about that because I had left Green Lantern to do Superboy and the Ravers. And he's like, "Why the heck did you do that?" And it's like, "Well, I was
Uh,
I wasn't the lead guy on Green Lantern. Daryl was still the lead guy, and I was just helping fill in, deadline stuff. So the opportunity came to get my own book, and so it's like, hey, I'm going to take it, when I get the chance. So.
yeah, no, it was. Hey, there's a character that I love, Superboy, but
Mhm.
there's another one. There's a number one on it. Oh, I have to jump and read that. So I read it. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then there's Superboy and the Ravers. Um, but there was King Shark in it, and that was cool.
I'm trying to. Well, that was in the regular Superboy book,
Was
right?
it? All right. Well,
Yeah, yeah.
um, I respect the fact that you're able to laugh at that.
Mhm.
Um, so let me ask you. I just love that we just discussed Superboy and the Ravers. Um, so to date, what do you think is probably your best work out of whether it's CrossGen, DC, Marvel? What are you most proud of?
Hmm. Well, there were some later issues of negation for CrossGen that I was really proud of. Um, I think the first batch of Hulk issues I did with Greg Pak. We had Danny Mickey inking me and Frank Diarmata doing the colors. And I'm really proud of the way those issues turned out. I think those were really solid. Um, yeah, it's weird. I mean, I'll look at some of the Aquaman stuff, especially the earlier ones with Rod coloring, and I'm super proud of a lot of that stuff. But honestly, I mean, I just try to do the best I can with what I have at the time. And it takes a while afterwards to look back and think, wow, it's like, how did I do that? That ended up looking pretty good. So, but yeah, I would say probably some of those Hulk issues. But I mean, I'm proud of a lot of the She-Hulk stuff I did. I thought that was a lot of fun. Um, so yeah, I would say probably the first what 6 issues I think of the Hulk stuff I did with Greg Pak. I was really proud of that.
That's awesome.
Hmm.
Now, would you say that would it be those issues where you became most confident in your work, or was it another run or another character that you worked on where you kind of realized, okay, yeah, I'm this is it. I'm doing it. You know, I am confident in doing what I'm doing, and I've established myself and all that good stuff.
You know what? I actually think some of that came when I was working at CrossGen.
Mm.
Because I mean, even when they hired me, I'm like, I don't know if I should be here. I don't know if I'm the right guy to be here. But everybody to a person was like, hey, they wouldn't have hired you here if they didn't think you belonged. And I think as I progressed through the negation stuff, I think I was starting to feel more and more confident in what I was doing, and felt like I belonged with these other guys. So I think it's probably during that time, and that's why I can look at the stuff I did in the '90s up to CrossGen, and then look at what I did after CrossGen. And I think that's where I gained my confidence was working in that studio.
That seems to be a running theme. A lot of people have said that, regardless of anything else that's going on behind the scenes administratively, within that company. But a lot of artists, writers, they seem to have really cut their teeth there, and kind of they just felt, at least about their work,
Mhm.
they felt really good about it.
Well, I think with CrossGen, they were smart in hiring a lot of artists that were good at what they did, but kind of overlooked by the companies they were working for, regardless if it was DC or Marvel.
Hmm.
Um, and being in the studio working with the inkers and the colorists right there, it really gave uh, pencils like me a chance to really be involved with what the final product was going to look like. And I think we all gained a sense of confidence from that, and like I said, regardless of the weirdness that happened there, I think getting that opportunity really helped us all out. Like I said, a lot of us were the Greg Lands, Steve Eptings. I mean, we did solid work, but it was just kind of overlooked by the companies we were working with. So, and Croston was smart in picking those kind of people because we wanted to put our best foot forward,
Right.
and I think the work showed in the books.
What were some, at least in your opinion, like what were some major differences between Marvel and DC and how they are run?
I mean, for my end, it's not really that different because I mean, it's just getting the
Business.
work done, turning it in, get paid pretty much. Um, I think I think DC took care of their people a little better than Marvel. At least, yeah, I would say, especially after Disney bought Marvel, I think there was less connection to the talent that kind of helped make Marvel what it was. Um, so, but I mean, like I said, I was never a DC fan growing up, but I loved working with them. They always treated me well, and not that Marvel didn't, they did.
Hmm.
But yeah, DC, that's most of my career right there. So I'd say out of what 30 years, it's probably half of that easily with
Okay.
with DC.
So, what do you have going on next, and what can we look forward to?
Well, most of last year, I spent doing a 120-page graphic novel for the gaming company Cool Minis or Not. The project was called The Others, kind of a horror adventure book. Hoping it'll be out at the by the end of this year. I mean, I finished it last year, and Drew Hennessy did the ink work. He wrapped it up shortly after I did, and Laura Martin is coloring it right now. And it's about, I think she's got about 70 pages done. So hoping by the end of the year it'll be out. And
Only
then,
120 pages.
hmm?
Only
Yeah,
120
yeah, only
pages.
120 pages. And yeah, I mean, I had to jump on something like that because I think the last bunch of projects I did with DC were spot things like an issue here, half an issue there. I was jumping all over the place. So the idea of working on a one book, 120 pages, which is essentially what, 6 issues worth of work.
Yeah.
That really appealed to me. That it's like good because I kind of like. I mean, I don't know about most artists, but for me, it takes me a good 3 or 4 issues to really get into a character and learn, how to approach the character and whatnot. So if I'm constantly jumping around from book to book, it gets kind of difficult with that. So that project was a ton of fun. John Barber, who was a editor of Marvel, I think he wrote Transformers for, is it IDW?
Yeah.
He wrote the others. So that was a lot of fun. Currently, I've been working with a video game company, Lithos, Liithos, on a book called Trace War, and it's based on their video game property. About halfway through issue 6 now. I'm not exactly sure how it's going to be released. If it's going to be in physical form or just digital or like an in-game type thing. But yeah, so it's been a challenging book to work on. But I'm pretty proud of the stuff I've done on it so far.
Is
And,
that, I didn't mean to cut you off, but what's that process like working for, as you said, a video game company, drawing or, working on a comic book?
Mhm.
Is that, are you creating this for a digital format, or are you creating it for a print format that'll just be maybe transferred digitally?
Yeah, I'm on my end, I'm drawing pretty much exactly the same way I did with Marvel and DC. I'm
Okay.
drawing it as if it's going to be in print format.
Okay.
But for all I know, it'll be like a bonus, bonus issues you can find within the game where you can read the issues
Oh,
digitally.
okay.
I'm hoping, I mean, like I said, the release plan is still kind of up in the air right now. So I've been working on that lately, and then I've also started working on a 30-page John Carter one shot with Ron Mars.
Oh,
That
okay.
I'm probably going to be doing with Dynamite. So I just started doing some work on that. And that's been, the Trace War stuff is more. It's like I said, it's based on a kind of a futuristic, apocalyptic video game. So for me, it's been drawing stuff that's not exactly in my wheelhouse. So when Ron approached me to do the John Carter thing, it's like, oh, that could be fun. So trying to squeeze in pages on the side of that, and it's nice. I think it's the first time I've worked with Ron since the Green Lantern days. So I've always enjoyed working with him. So it was a good chance to reunite on John Carter.
And welcome back. So, what'd you guys think? I really enjoyed talking to Paul. I loved hearing about his time at CrossGen. He really seemed to be heavily influenced professionally by his time there. It really affected him in a positive way. Regardless of what happened, he really appreciated his time there and helped him grow as an artist. Again, loved hearing about Superboy and the Ravers. I was one of the few that got every damn issue. They're somewhere over there in the box. Um, but hey, look, we all do that, right? There's a number one. You're gonna pick it up and you just stick it out. Um, hey, we got King Shark from that, right? That was cool. But look, hey, I hope you guys enjoyed Dollar Bin Bandits for 2023. It's been fun. Okay, we had a great time giving you the latest and greatest fresh content that we can provide. And as we plan for 2024, it's shaping up to be even better. We have a lot of great guests in store. Like I said, we're taking next week off. So play some old episodes. In the meantime, leave us a comment. Share our info on online. Go to TeePublic, buy some merch. Need a last minute gift? Well, unless you want to spend overnight shipping, you can do that. But you have something coming up in January, February. Yeah, go to TeePublic, get a T-shirt of the Dollar Bin Bandits. It has our logo emblazoned on the front. But seriously, look, it's been fun. We'll see you guys in the new year.